Hey everybody, this is Zach with Spooki Tanuki Games. For the entire month of October, we'll only be looking at scary games. This week we're looking at the stellar Alan Wake, released for the Xbox 360. I've wanted to play Alan Wake for a long time. I didn't have an Xbox 360 until recently, but Alan Wake's always looked interesting. That, coupled with the fact that it was created by Remedy Games and was one of the biggest games of 2010, made Alan Wake a must-play for me. 7 years later, I finally got my chance. On the cover of the game, it says a psychological action thriller. Let's see if that moniker holds true, shall we? This is Alan Wake. He's a writer and completely meta.
Towns where everybody knew everybody.
Welcome to the Oh Dear Diner.
Hi, I was wondering if you could help me. I'm looking for...
Mr. Wake. Alan Wake. Oh, God. I am your biggest fan. I know people say that all the time, but I really am.
I'm glad to hear that.
Alan Wake opens with him and his wife traveling to the fictitious town of Bright Falls, Washington. Alan wants to get away from the pressures of being a successful author. His wife hopes to help him find inspiration for his new book, and that doesn't go well.
Alice? What is this?
I guess I have a small confession to make. I thought maybe you could write here that a change of scenery would get you past...
Damn it, Alice, everyone
Hey,
keeps...
hey, just hear me out. There's a local doctor, Dr. Hartman. I read a book of his. He has a private clinic here. He specializes in helping artists.
So now you want to get me committed?
No, it's not like that.
Alan's wife goes missing, and so begins Alan's descent into the topsy-turvy world of Alan Wake. How many times will I say Alan Wake in this review? A lot. The narrative of Alan Wake is episodic, and this keeps the writing tight. It also adds a compulsive nature to the player's desire to keep playing, because each episode ends with a cliffhanger. Much like Remedy's better-known protagonist Max Payne, Alan Wake monologues a lot. As a character, Alan is a pretty conceited and downright dickish person.
Talk to my wife.
I had the pleasure of discussing your situation with her on several occasions.
Did you set something up with her?
I invited her here. My clinic is a place where...
Oh, hey, oh my. Take it easy.
Fortunately, all the characters that surround Alan are much more enjoyable. Everyone else in the story has so much energy. Whether it's evil energy or spastic, it all adds a good contrast to Alan Wake's sullen demeanor. At the core of Alan Wake's personality is a good person, though. He cares about those who are closest to him, and that invests the player into what happens to Alan Wake. The story of Alan Wake is full of cultural references that will please an astute observer of popular culture far beyond video games. The town of Bright Falls is essentially Twin Peaks, and there are some not-so-subtle nods to The Shining and many more. Beyond all of the monologues and allusions to other horror games, Alan Wake's story is a thrilling ride all the way to the ending. The pacing is well done, and each act feels necessary to the plot. Remedy Games has become synonymous with bullet time, and they even make a not-so-gentle nod to their reputation during Alan Wake. However, Alan Wake is distinct from their prior games. Alan Wake's gameplay is a third-person arena shooter at heart. This isn't so much a survival horror game due to the fact that there's plenty of ammo lying around. Speaking of ammo, use it. Most of the time your ammo is taken away at the end of each night or sometimes mid-level. There's no need to try to save it. Remedy knows how to make a good shooter, and Alan Wake is no exception. The main gimmick of the combat is how light plays a factor in each of the skirmishes. You weaken the enemies, known as the Taken, with your flashlight by pressing the left trigger. When you blast an enemy with your light, they'll be stopped in their tracks. For the most part. The flashlight has limited ammo, and you'll have to reload it with batteries or let it refill over time. Flares or flashbangs can be used with the right bumper. Flashbangs are more or less useless in other games, but in Alan Wake, they're a potent option. The most powerful weapon is the flare gun, which is basically the equivalent of a bazooka. Once enemies have been exposed to enough light, then they're susceptible to attacks with your guns. Alan Wake gains access to handguns as well as rifles and shotguns. You use your guns to land the finishing blow. Guns are used with the right trigger. Essentially, Alan Wake is a dual weapon shooter, much like Max Payne. Dodging is done with the left bumper and a directional input. It doesn't work all that great, and I felt it to be very imprecise. Sometimes I would dodge and sometimes I wouldn't. I never could get a consistent result. Keeping your distance between you and the enemy will pay off well though. That's more challenging than you'd think. Almost every time you encounter a new lot of enemies, one is flanking you from the left or from the right, off the bat. You have a 50-50 shot at guessing correctly which side they're on. Guess wrong and you're getting hit. Alan Wake presents some many interesting new additions to the third-person shooter genre, and one in particular I was quite fond of. Your flares can be thrown down to provide temporary cover. You can aim the flashlight or gun through the flare, and your enemies can't really do anything about it. You can also drop one right in front of an enemy as they attack you, and this basically turns into a mine, doing maximum damage. I wish I could throw the flares and flashbangs though. The combat overall is exciting to play, and you'll enjoy taking down hordes of enemies that the game throws at you. There are driving segments that feel inorganic. The driving segments felt more like filler to me. The controls were imprecise, and there isn't much good about them. Oftentimes I don't enjoy horror games visually due to their lack of fidelity. I feel that all too often, dark, bleak sets mask the lackluster visual experience that many horror games have. Alan Wake is a fantastic looking game during the day and by night. By day, Bright Falls looks like a Pacific Northwestern town. The shops are quaint, and the outdoors are full of mossy trees and large ferns. The warm light that blankets Bright Falls makes you feel safe. As night falls, Alan Wake maintains the same level of authenticity. The only change is now the environments feel more threatening. The game doesn't wash out with blacks and browns though. Instead, it opts for deeper greens and dark blues. Light plays a critical role in Alan Wake's gameplay and storytelling. The interplay between light and darkness lends itself to some great level design. Most of your first encounters with the Taken will be in the forest. Your linear goal is to get to a gas station or some other sign of civilization. You'll see this civilization in the distance, all lit up. As you make your way through the level, you'll see the lights getting ever closer. This simultaneously makes you feel a sense of relief that you'll be safe soon, as well as a sense of urgency to finally get to your destination. As long as Alan Wake is in the darkness, he's under threat. The light is his salvation. This is a clever way to make the player feel what Alan feels. While traveling through the levels, there will be giant breezes that move through the level. This means that the Taken are on their way. I love these moments because you know it's time to strap up. Feeling that sense of a coming storm gives you enough warning to get ready for what's next. During these moments, the environments take on an inky aesthetic that fits perfectly with the Taken's own character designs. The enemy designs are your usual big bodies and quick stabbies that you're used to seeing in other games. They're covered in a black ooze that, once stripped by the light, leaves the enemies looking much closer to the undead. Inanimate objects also can attack Alan. To me, this came off as pretty ludicrous though. The particle effects as you blast the Taken look good, and the varying gradations of light in Alan Wake are impressive. From blindingly bright lights to low frequency yellowish brown to the things that go boom, Alan Wake nails the lighting. The character models in Alan Wake felt a bit stiff. This may have been due to Alan Wake's long development cycle though. I don't find this to be much of an issue, but it was a common complaint of the game. The lip syncing is much more of a problem to me. During the in-game cutscenes, no one seems to be in control of their own faces. I'm the most conflicted with Alan Wake's visuals in regards to product placement. I can't determine if this is super grimy or just adding to the authenticity of the world. I err on the former, but I can't put my finger on exactly why. As a 7th generation game, Alan Wake is showing its age. That is in no way a negative. Alan Wake could be held up as an example of what was being achieved in the 7th generation. The sound department is a bit underwhelming to me. While all the guns have a forceful pop, the overall sound design is a little flat. I couldn't tell where enemies were based on their auditory cues. This only led to a few deaths in my playthrough. It's a minor critique of an otherwise stellar sonic package. The sounds of blasting the Taken with your flashlight sounds like a scream on fire. I'm not sure how Remedy layered the sounds to create this distinct noise, but it'll stick with you long after the credits roll. The sounds of the wind moving through the trees and the crunch of Alan's feet on the forest floor all give you the impression that you're in the middle of nowhere. The score provided by Petri Alenko is marvelous. This soundtrack has mood and atmosphere for miles. With its use of stringed and electronic instruments, the score is both inquisitive and thrilling at the same time. The dark keys mixed with the metallic percussion and frantic violins contextualize Alan's own journey through his memories. The tunes are deeply reflective and dark. The music fits perfectly with the mood of the story. There are undercurrents of the menacing supernatural that will keep the player wanting to push forward even though you dread what may come next. The high crescendos and solemn ambient moments match the storytelling perfectly. The only issue I have with the soundtrack is that it fades in and out so quickly, you can miss it. Let's turn down some of this noise and have a listen. You'll definitely want to listen to this soundtrack independent of the game to get the most out of this epic score. Each episode ends with the licensed song that shows off the eclectic taste of Remedy games. The selections are intriguing. Would you put Roy Orbison, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and David Bowie in the same mixtape? That's what Remedy did. And it works well to encapsulate the episode you just finished playing. The voice acting in Alan Wake is good. I feel that Alan Wake, played by Matthew Peretta, comes off as a bit monotone. This may be more due to the character than the actor though. Other than that, everyone fits their roles well. I especially like Barry and the police officer, Nightingale.
Hey, this is really good. I think my tongue just took a crap in my mouth. Ugh. Oh, wait, we're in jail now? Oh, ow.
This is Agent Nightingale, FBI! Get him up, Hemingway! You're under arrest!
Alan Wake is a great experience for the Xbox 360 and PC. It took me about 9 hours to complete. Alan Wake is a middle-of-the-road shooter as far as difficulty is concerned. If you get surrounded, you'll probably die. However, you can run from many encounters as long as you can get to the light before you die. If you get to the light in time, all the enemies will disappear. You have a few options for buying Alan Wake. It'll run you about $15 for the 360. Alan Wake was packaged with Quantum Break, Remedy's newest game, with the 2 extra DLC episodes. Unfortunately, there was no Xbox 360 version where the game came with all of the DLC chapters. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Alan Wake. It's been on my backlog for a long time, and now that I've finally gotten to play it, I wish there was another game in the pipeline. Alan Wake is a unique experience because it offers you a dichotomy of sensations. During the day, Alan's adventure is intriguing. The characters he meets are stimulating, and the mystery surrounding the town of Bright Falls is genuinely suspenseful. By night, Alan Wake is a white-knuckled horror shooter. You never quite know what is real and what isn't as night falls. This is Zach with Spooki Tanuki Games. Please remember that a like, a comment, or a subscribe means a lot to me and of course the channel. Enjoy.
Alan, please. You're sliding back into the...
Tell me one more lie and I'll shoot you in the face.